Hello, my name is Travis Baylitz, or otherwise known as Travesty. That is the rapping name that I've given myself. It's also going to be associated with beats that I will be able to produce in the future and actually hopefully copyright and sell off to other artists or possibly use for myself. Anyways, I got a recent message from a good friend of mine. He's also a fellow composer. Basically, if you look on here, as you notice, he has replied that, anyways, his name is Bruneville. Not quite sure what his real name is, but he goes by the name Bruneville, and he does have a YouTube account. But basically, I have not heard this, well, I probably did hear this piece, but it's been a while. But his question was, how do I script, or actually, how do I notate an improvisation that I've done into sheet music? I don't know how to read them, and I don't know where to begin. So this is what the tutorial is how to teach someone to notate an improvisational score or a melody of some sort from the sounds that they hear onto an actual sheet music. First of all, let's listen to the song that he wants to actually wants to be able to notate. Basically asked me to do it, but I've kind of been working pretty hard on my rap album. But I thought I'd just give him a hand. I'm trying to help this guy out because he's a really good composer, and I have to admit that he's probably one of the best ones that I've known for all types of gothic melodies. So I think the first step is actually, what is the first step on creating sheet music? Well, first of all, I think you need to be able to have a material that you're going to work from. Typically, you would like to have sheet music with a whole bunch of stabs on it. These are called stabs. I believe so. I could be wrong, but I think they're called stabs. Anyhow, as we keep going, if you want to be able to notate by hand or by the computer, since I do have eye strain issues, I sometimes go by hand, but it's been very rare. I mean, I did compose one piece from ear, and I didn't transpose it to sheet music or didn't transcribe it, and it was pretty much a pain in the ass because it's a very difficult process. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of understanding on musical knowledge that I would kind of call it. But anyway, sheet music. Where would you find sheet music if you want to do it by hand? You go to www.blanksheetmusic.com. I think that, or actually blanksheetmusic.net, excuse me. It's blanksheetmusic.net. And what you want to do is, from here you can actually print music off. Typically, I'd like to leave it playing with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, with 10 stabs on it, or 10 stabs, yeah. You want to stick with 10 stabs. I mean, I know you can add more in terms of scale, but I prefer 10 because it just seems to be great, because then you can have a treble clef and a bass clef. We'll get to what clefs are in a minute. But anyways, you can print these off from here and just hit print, and there you go. I don't recommend adding any of these other type of stuff unless you know for sure that you're going to stick with a treble and bass clef or a treble and treble clef. It's just primarily a lot easier to just start from scratch and then write it down if you need to. So let's go another route. Another route that I often use, I say 90% bass, and spite my eye strain. The 90% basses, I use a Finale program, which is great for notating things digitally. You can go to www.finale.com, and then you'll be able to actually pick up a copy of it. There's different versions. There's let's see. We can see the products here. There's Finale, Print Music, Songwriter, Notepad, and Smart Music. Typically, I started off with Notepad. That's probably the cheapest version. I believe that you can get that for $10. Why not? It's cheap as hell. So it's something that you might want to consider. But there's Print Music too. But if you want the nuts and bolts of a professional piece, I would recommend Finale itself, because it just has everything that you need in there. Now there's also another program called Sibelius. I've used it before. I actually sold the piece because I just did not like how notes were implemented. It made it a little bit tough for me. I just did not get used to the program, so I kind of just tossed that aside. But that is also an option. There's other options that are out there that you can actually just kind of work with that. So now, what's the first step? Well, let's just open Finale. We'll go to a new document setup wizard. We'll go to next and just add a piano, add that, hit next. I won't name it, but this is just a way to teach Bruneville and other people that want to write sheets from a piece that they've actually scored just by ear. So anyway, I'm not quite sure we'll just leave the time signature 4x4, and then we'll leave the tempo the way it is. We'll just leave it in C major until I figure things out here. So let's see. Okay, what do we have here? What I typically often do is actually the first step that I want to make sure is that the keyboard here, the keyboard right here is actually hooked up to the computer. So how do I go about doing that? Well, let's see. I want to make sure that it faces on there. All right. So typically, okay. So typically you want to go to MIDI audio instrument setup, or actually device setup and MIDI setup. You want to make sure that your Casio USB is hooked up. So you just want to hit that, or whatever type of keyboard you have. There's a different type of outlets that you can use for USB. There's outlets that are MIDI to... There's actually a MIDI USB cable, one with two different prongs that hook up to keyboards with... I'm not quite sure what they're called, but they're just two inserts that hook up to a USB outlet. I actually have a different cable. It's called a USB A to a B cable, and that actually works a lot more effectively because... for one thing, it doesn't take up much space. But anyways, you can look those two up. You want to look up a USB A to B or just a USB MIDI cable. So any of those would work. So let's MIDI setup, hit OK. So let's see if the note works. Add a note, and let's see, add it. Yep, see how I just dip. All I have to do is actually press a note, and it shows up on the keyboard, which is great. Okay, we're set up there. Okay, so as I stated, what we have right here are stabs. These are just stabs. You got a treble clef and a bass clef. And where the lines are, these are measures. These are measures. Measures, okay? All these lines here are measures. And what we have right here are rest. There's different types of notes over here, but I'll kind of get to that in a bit. So, what we have over here is actually the time signature. This can be a little bit difficult because what this represents is that the top one represents the number of beats per measure. So we got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the beat duration represents the tempo of each measure. So right here, if you just look at this way, there are 4 beats, and then a quarter note gets 4 beats. If you divide it by a quarter note, there's different type of notes that I kind of want to get across. I know I haven't gotten into that yet, but time signature is very important because you can actually define the beats that you're at, or the measure and the beats that you're trying to score. So before this, we'll kind of just go for what these notes are. We got a whole note over here, half note, quarter note, and an 8th note, 16th note, 32nd note, and a 64th, and 128th note. I hardly even go up to more than the 16th note. 32nd is a little high, but I know that can be a little bit pain. Because for one thing, it might take a while for you to score, and typically I don't think there are a lot of music that are intermediate that even go up that high. Then we got a dot. These can actually represent, see, let's say we have a half or a half note, which would take up 2 beats since it's a half note. But anyway, right here we have a dot. So what happens here is that actually you have the dot, So basically, a quarter note gets 1 beat. A half note gets 2 beats out of 4 measures. A half note dot gets 3 beats, and a whole note gets 4. That makes sense. So quarter note, 1 beat. Half note 2, half note dot, 3, quarter note 4. Now this can actually change. I mean, if this was cut time, let's say we put the time signature to half time. Let's say cut time. You can see here that if you put a quarter note and a half, that actually gets 1 beat. Let's see, hold on. Quarter note, let's see. Well, let me see how I do this. It can change. What I want to do is actually make this a 16th measure. Let's see, a 6x8 measure. So a 6x8 let's see, eighth note gets 6 beats. A quarter note gets 1 beat. And let's see here. Actually, I want to change this 6/8 to sorry about this. I'm trying to figure out exactly what I'm trying to do here, and I'm kind of messing up here. But anyway, what I wanted to do was actually show you how like some of these beats can actually be used. Basically, all I'm trying to show you is that the dot represents half of what the note that you just clicked on. So a quarter note, this would actually get a quarter note and a half. So what's half of a quarter note? That'd be an eighth. So this would be a quarter note and an eighth note that's actually taking over the measure. So eighth note, as I stated, eighth note gets, an eighth note, which is the bottom note, eighth note gets 6 beats. So if you put 2 eighth notes together, that gets 2 beats. Okay, 2 beats, got it? Let's see, a quarter note gets 2 beats. Cut that in half, that's another eighth. So you got 3 beats. That's what that dot does. It represents half of the note. So I don't want to take up too much time here since it's just kind of really basic stuff. But anyway, we got here is the sharp. Is that if you're on a C scale, you can add sharps with is actually a half step up from an original note. For instance, if you got a C, sharp would be a C sharp here. And then if we have a flat, half of a step down would be a B. Now this is a lot of information that you kind of got to get across, so I hope that you might be able to keep up here. So let's say if we have a C sharp here, let's put a C sharp, C sharp. Let's say you wanted to create a natural. What that does is actually, what this natural does is if you have a sharp in a measure that follows it, you can actually create a regular C. A C sharp, which is up a half a step. A C natural is just its natural tone, and that goes down a step. This can be a little tricky because if you have a C minor and you start with the let's see, you start with into a major chord, so it would be E. The natural of that would actually be an E flat. So I'll show you here. Let's just change the times or the key signature to. We'll get to key signatures in a bit. So C minor, C minor, C sharp, C minor. Okay. So if we put a E here, which would be E flat, and we want to create a minor to that, it'd be an E, because what a natural is just it doesn't include any of the, it does not include any of the black keys, so that's what a natural does. And there's also a double flat, if you notice, right there, which can be used in some music and more moderate to advanced type of music. So anyway, let's get back to here. Okay. I think I'm taking a lot of time here, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. But anyway, we'll delete these measures, hit cut, and then we'll go from there. So anyway, let's see what we have here. This is actually a tie. A tie actually creates a length. It lengthens a note. So if you got a quarter note and let's say you got a half note and you got a quarter note, but you want to tie these together, so you just tie them together. So that what happens here is that when you tie, the following note after the tie, or the loop following it, which is this note right here, this would not be played again. It actually would be part of the first beat. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, as we put this back into quarter time, or actually time signature 4x4, you'll notice that that takes 3 beats, and then that takes 4, and then you will want to tie that there. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want to, if you, without the tie, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. But with the tie, you just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the tie is actually included. So why the hell would you add a quarter note, or actually a quarter note with a tie, with the beat 3? You typically won't. You just add a whole note for that. So, but anyway, here is the measures that we have, or the rests. Rests are actually important for music. What you don't hear is actually silence is a really key factor to a lot of classical music. I don't know if you noticed that, but with classical music in general, it's the silences that count. And typically, if you look over here, a whole note, a whole rest would take an entire measure here. So how can you determine what's a whole note and a half rest? Half rest typically has the hat up. You can kind of look at it right here. It kind of looks like a hat, with the hat facing upward, it sits on top of your head. A whole one actually looks like with the hat upside down. So how can you tell, how do you remember a whole note is actually the upside down version? Well, just figure out what would be able to fill up with water. If the hat was filled with rain and something caught a bowl, what would fill it up? Well, obviously the whole note would. So you want to remember that the whole rest is actually the one with the hat upside down. And then this is a quarter rest. And you got 8th, 16th, 32nd, 64, 128. I'll go through these really quickly because I think that after time you'll kind of be able to pick it up, and I don't think they're too big of a deal right now. But anyway, let's determine how the hell can you write sheet music from the beginning. Well, first of all, I think the most important step is to understand the keys on here. How can you determine on a keyboard what is the middle C? I think the most important note on the keyboard, the keystone key, is actually the middle C right here. And how do you determine where the middle C is? Well, to be honest with you, the best way to do it is actually look over here to a full stand, or a full upright piano, because it has all the keys. This is only an 88 key. This has the entire key set. But right here, if you just notice right here, I'll go through very quickly on the keys that you would want to kind of address it as. Typically, the first note on a keyboard is the A. It's the A. Typically on most keyboards, it begins with an A. And the end note is typically a C. It's kind of hidden under there, but we'll just pretend this is a high C, which is, it isn't, but we'll just determine it is a high C. So how do we determine this? Well, keys are actually very easy once you kind of figure it out. Typically, you know, with 2 black keys, you got 2 black keys and 3 black key pairs. 2 black keys followed by 2 white keys, 3 black keys followed by 2 white keys. So typically, how can you determine what is the C? Because C is probably the biggest important step, I think, because it's just the most easiest key to remember. I think, like I said, it's a keystone key. So how do we determine this? You actually remember, what are all the C's? The C's are typically the keys that is below the 2 black key pair, which is 1, 2. So you know that the bottom one below the black key would be a C. So another pair of 2 black keys is here. So take your pointer and go down a half an interval, which is half a step. So that's right there, C. Now this is the middle C. How do you determine it? Typically it's often mostly kind of in the middle. I'd say it's often like it's usually 3 keys up, or 3 octaves up. An octave is actually 8 keys, 8 keys. Got that? 8 keys on a scale. There's different types of scales, which I think we'll probably get to later. But anyway, middle C is important. C, 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 C. And what C looks like on here, if you notice, we just hit C, C. C is usually, you got a staff of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. Right below that, which is 1, 2, you got 2 lines. So you got half a step and a whole step. They're whole steps here. The C is usually, looks like on paper right there. What would a D look like? Well, if we just do this, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So that what we have here is a major scale. What's happening here is that I've actually have it in minor, so we just put that to major, and then typically I'll redo this, hit delete. Actually, I'll just do this. 1, 2. Major scale. Happy. Happy, happy, happy. Minor scale. There's a lot of information here. I know it's going to be pretty tough for those that don't have any musical background, but hopefully I'll be able to kind of determine if it's major, minor, harmonic minor, or some other type of melodic scale that I'm not quite sure of. But I'm pretty sure after a while you might be able to get a hang of it. Just always remember that the C looks like that. This middle C is below the 5 staves on a major scale or a treble clef, and it's right there. Before we even get to the beginning, I think the most important step is to understand what these clefs are. As you kind of notice, this looks like a G, doesn't it? This kind of looks like a G. If you notice a G, a capital G, I think it's just a fancy form of a G. So if you look between here, which is actually between the squigglies or this little hole, right between that is this staff or the staff line, which is actually, if you hit here and you press the G, that's where the G lies. You can that's the quickest note on how you can determine where a G lies on the treble clef. Typically, it's the second line up, and that's where the G is. For a bass clef, which looks like an F, hence, if you hit F right between the 2 dots, and you push F right here below middle C, that's where F looks like. Right there. Right between the 2 dots. So, those are the 2 helpful things. These are clefs. Treble, bass. What would middle C look like on a bass clef? Well, just hit middle C, and it's right there. So you notice that it's 2 half steps or a whole step above the 5 lines. Or for a treble clef, a whole step below whole step or 2 half steps below the 5 staff lines, okay? Now that's basic keys. I hope you kind of picked it up. Let's kind of move on to how to actually describe the music. This is probably the most tedious, I guarantee it, this is like the most tedious, actually, I would consider this the most tedious process of notating music, because primarily, even I have trouble doing it because it takes so much work to transcribe a song that even I am still learning on how to do it. So with that in mind, I kind of just want you to be aware that even I have patience for this, or I don't have patience for it because of the eye strain that it can cause using sheet music. I mean, I have written by sheets before. It just can be extremely, extremely difficult to do. So, anyway, let's move on from here. Okay. Okay, the next step is actually how to transcribe music. Music. How can we do this, man? It's already been like half. Alright, well, I'll try to scoot this in 5 minutes because I know I don't have a lot of time doing this. But we'll kind of just see what happens here. I think the first step to actually notate and transcribe a piece from ear onto sheets is to listen to the tempo. 4-1. It's kind of hard to hear because I would actually recommend going to these type of positions and kind of just determine it. So Let's just take the piano part and kind of describe it. Just see where the tempo is. 1, 2. I think it's in 4/time. I'll just assume it's in 4/time, but it could be something different. You just kind of have to determine and tweak with it. It could be a 3/4 time, or we'll just see. The tempo seems to be 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. What we have here is actually metronome. Seems like it's hard to beats. I mean, there's actually online, if you look up online metronome or flash metronome, you'll find something like this, and we can check it out. So just do it. I'm really sure it's good. We'll just assume it's 145 beats measure. 145. It sounds like it's 145. So we'll go back to finale. This is where the tempo is. We'll type 145. So that seems to be the consistent beat. So we'll change this to current counter setting. Okay, so how can we determine this? Let's just take a really the next step after determining the tempo is to actually figure out what scale it's in. And that can be really difficult. But let's just see. Dun, 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 dun. So let's go. Well, to be honest with you, after some self-study, it looks like it's actually in... It's either in F... It's either in G sharp major or A flat major or F minor. So I'm kind of basing this on ear. You can kind of hear what major sounds like. This is major. Sounds happy. Minor sounds a lot different. Now there's actually a technique on what defines a major and minor chord. You just kind of have to determine a major chord is basically starting from the C right here. You look at C. So let's do a major scale. Whole, whole, half, whole. So whole, half, whole, half. And minor would be whole, half, half, or whole. So whole, half, half, whole. So typically, it's most important in major scales to remember that the 3 and the 4th note for a major is half, and the 7 and 8th is a half. Typically, on a scale, you want to determine that there's 8 notes on which is octave, 8 octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 notes on a scale. That's typically how it runs for major, minor, melodic minor, things like that. So, since we determined it's a major chord, I think it sounds like it's in major. Or I actually think it's in minor. He typically writes in melodic minor, so I assume it's actually a F minor. I believe it's F minor. I could be wrong, but I believe it's F minor, but we can determine that in a bit. So we'll just consider it F minor. But remember that for actually Major scale, the half step intervals for a half step is actually 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, and half is 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. That's all you need. 2, 3, 5, 6, minor. And then major 3, 4, and 7, 8, which is actually major. Okay, so let's just determine that it's actually in the key signatures in F minor. Okay. There's a lot of flats here. You got to be aware. Typically, flats can be a really bit challenging because even when you write flats, it starts with a B, E, A, D, and it goes to G, and it keeps crawling down. You always start with a B. I'm not quite sure. I guess it just looks a little bit more professional. I'm not quite sure why the B is actually at the beginning. Maybe it's just because it fits on the scale. I have no idea why they would start with a B. But it does flow because it's really simple. Sharps are typically, if we actually have a sharp, let's just say F minor, F major. See, sharps starts with F, C, G, and then with F minor it goes B, E. So remember that. Remember the first two, and then just keep going down for flats if you want to increase scale. So B, E for flats, and the F for let's see. So let's go F major, C sharp. Okay, so F, C. When you have a sharps in the scale, it always starts with F, C, G, and then keeps going up. Or actually F, C, G. Let's double check. We can actually just determine this. Just add some more sharps. So it looks. I guess that there's really not a pattern for that. So it's really hard to remember. Even I don't remember it. I just write whatever. I have trouble sometimes figuring out what or how to actually write the sharps in it. But it looks like it's F, C, G, D, A, E, B, and then for major or it goes B, E. So B, E when you want flats, sharps, F, and then C, F, C. Okay. But anyway, we determine this as F minor, so we'll just leave it in F minor. We'll just also assume it's in quarter 4 time. It just makes it easier. But let's just pick a really easy part, so because it's already 34 minutes. 2, 3, 4. The best way to actually hear it is kind of just sing it, because then you can kind of figure out what the beat is with your left foot. Try to keep with your left foot or right foot. Try to keep the beat, which is I think we determined that was 145. So let's just determine the right hand. Dum, 3, 4. Bum 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 bum. Dum dum. So if you kind of with the beat, this is where it takes a lot of practice of trying to develop ability to transcribe what you hear to sheets, because it can be really freaking tedious. Even I would probably want to get it, but it goes bum 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 bum. So based on what I'm wanting here, it seems like 1 2 1 2 and 3 and 1 2 and 3 1 2 and 3 4 1 2 and 3 4 and 1 2 and 3 4 and. So I always want to try to just hear the melody itself. So 1 So after that you can go 1 2 3 or bum 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 bum. And based on this, if you get really good at it, it seems like it's a really simple melody. So 1 2 and 3 1 2 and 1 2 and. So if you want to slow it down, so you go 1. So if you want to even go faster, 1 and 2 and 1 2 and 3 and, or 1 2 and 3 and. So 1 2 and, or 1 and or 1 2 and, or 1 1 and 2 and 3, or 1, or see, even I'm getting confused, but let's say 1. I think it's 1, 2, and 3. It's hard to say. I know it starts at the 1 and it's on the end of the 2 and then it goes to 3 and end of 4. How do I know that? Just because I can hear it. And I can determine it with my beat without even telling you. It's just hard to kind of slow it down, but you can actually change these into half. You can beat this 1 and 2 and. So you go 1 and 2, or 1 and 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 1, 2 and 1, 2 and 3, 1, 2 and, or it's at 1, 2 and 4, 1 and 1, 2 and 4, and so it goes 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and. So how do we determine this? I can already tell you it's an A. So this is what I hear right here is 1. I got a pretty good ear, so it goes 1. I know they go off by and, so I go 1. So let's add an 8th note. 1. One, 2 and 3. 1, 2 and done. So F. Okay. I think this is what I hear. We can always play it back, but 1. Let's see. Let's go with 1, 2, 1, 2, and done 1. Oof, that sounds a little off. It goes, but let's just try that again. I'm just trying to tear apart the melody, but it just seems like 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 4. Oh, maybe this is this 1 bump. Let's just see. Let's just try that. I just want to see if that's right then. It's a really simple piece, actually. So I actually think it's this 1, 2, and then it's actually this. So it's this, man. It's the 4th beat that actually does that. 1, 2, and. See? Perfect. So you got the beat here. You got let's see, a whole step or a quarter note and a half note, or a quarter note, or a whole note, a quarter note. I mean, sorry, I'm just getting a quarter note, an 8th note, an 8th note, quarter note, or a quarter note, or a, let's see, sorry. It goes a quarter note, 8th note, 8th note, quarter note, 8th, 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 or actually that's a half. I think this is actually this is a all right, half note with the dot, half note dot. So once again, it's quarter, or it's a quarter, 8th, 8th, quarter, 8, or quarter, 8th, 8th, quarter, 8th, 8th. So what do we have here is the piece. How do I determine that? So I always I can just hear my foot doing the beat, And after that, playing it. So you can go 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 1, 2, and so 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, 1, and 4, and 1, and 4, and, or another way to do it is that 1, 2, and 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, and. Just incorporate all the beats without the tie. So 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1. Sorry, I gotta go down octave because I can't sing that high. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. And 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 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 and. So I always incorporate the basic bass, the 1, 2, 3, 4 count always in there because it can actually help you build a better sense in how the syncopation works until you get good at 1, ha, da, da, and with your beat 1, and you can just kind of feel it. I mean, it's more of a feel. It's not really of how I'm able to determine how's that land on the 1 and the and of the second note and the fourth note and the and of the 1 note. How do I determine that? Well, it's just you just kind of feel it for a while, and that's actually how you begin to notate notes. And that is it. You hit this, repeat, and go. Now it's gonna be a little tricky to add the left hand. You're gonna have to be really nitpicky because I'm not sure if he goes into. I have a feeling that they're and notes, but it just doesn't seem to be really that difficult, just based on what I'm hearing here. And it seems like the chord, if we look, the four times seems to be great for the time signature. So once again, to determine that, step by step. 1, 2, and 4, and. Slow your beat down until you actually can kind of sing it out loud. So 1, da, 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 da. So you got those 5 notes there all lined up, and it's just spectacular. You got all those notes and you should be all right. So I think that pretty much covers it. Once again, just slow it down. I've covered everything from beginning to end. Hopefully, if there's any questions, just let me know. If anyone else has any questions, just let me know. So hopefully things will be addressed a little bit easier than that next time around. If you have any questions, I'll try to make some more tutorials. If you have any other questions with Cubase or Finale, just feel free to hit me up at Travesty. Once again, my rap CD is coming out in March. Or actually, I believe it's going to come in January, just based on how fast I'm progressing. I have a feeling I'm going to get some really good stuff here. It's my idea is to rap, compose, and perform. That's one of my hope on what I want to do. That's my passion. I want to get my words across. Got to get my expression across so I can move on, move forward at this, and hopefully just continue to teach the rest of the time. Teach or to inspire, to mentor, things like that. If you have any questions, you can call me at 651-491-8440 or manhopark@hotmail.com. I'm very, very passionate about music, so feel free to leave any questions. Once again, hit me up. This is a 45-minute video, so I wouldn't want to take up too much of your time. All right, peace.